I believe that we have an amazing event planned for you today. Looking forward to hearing from some inspiring speakers who are doing great things in the community as it relates to advancing racial equity. And I hope that you will enjoy those presentations. To get started, I am going to share with you a public notice. So we will be recording this event, which means that photo and video will be taken, and we may use some of those photos or the video footage for advertising or sort of publicity or materials later on throughout the year. And so by attending this meeting, you consent to your images being used for those purposes. And so if you don't want your images to be used, feel free to just turn your camera off. But if you're fine with that, keep your camera on as you participate in today's meeting. And so our agenda for today, we're going to get started with an Indigenous land acknowledgement. Then we'll have a welcome from Mayor Bussey and Dr. Joyce Esther, and then we'll jump right into the presentations from our community members. After those presentations, which will last for about 90 minutes or so, we'll have some closing remarks from any elected officials who are a part of this meeting who wish to speak, and then we'll end the night with a call to action and some networking. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and get started. And I am going to pass the virtual mic on to John Parker, the Bohosiwan, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Director for Normandale Community College. And he is going to lead us in an Indigenous land acknowledgement. So John, take it away.
Thank you, Faith. It was important to us as the organizers of tonight's event to open with a land acknowledgement. And while I am not Dakota, if you'll permit me, I would like to lead us as an Armenian American, as a grandson and great-grandson of genocide survivors, and as one whose own ancestral homelands are occupied by settlers. I would like to recognize that Minnesota is the homeland of the Dakota people, and that they, as well as the Anishinaabe people and indigenous peoples from other tribal nations, continue to reside in Minnesota and will continue to reside here. I would like to recognize that the land where the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers converge is known to the Dakota people as Bedote, which is a sacred site representing the spiritual and physical place of creation for the Dakota people. Tonight, as we come here together in community to commemorate the 5th annual Day of Racial Healing, we seek to bridge divides, to restore one another to wholeness, and to transform our communities into places that affirm the inherent value of all people, and we acknowledge that we do all of this on Dakota land.
John, thank you so much for sharing with us. I absolutely agree. It's important that we acknowledge that, and I am grateful for having you to fill that role tonight. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Mayor Bussey to give us a warm welcome. So Mayor, I will now pass along the virtual mic to you.
Thank you very much, Faith, and thank you, John, for that, for the opening of this meeting. That's a great way to open it. Thank you so very much. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us at this important event. My name is Tim Bussey. I have the honor and the pleasure of serving as the mayor of the city of Bloomington. I am very happy to welcome you to this gathering, which recognizes this annual day where communities across the country are calling for racial healing. They're celebrating our common humanity, and they're taking collective action to create a more just and equitable world. So with all of the uplifting rhetoric and the images from earlier today, it does feel right that this event and that inauguration day are on the same day. It really does. So the messages of hope and unity from President Biden, the overwhelming significance of Vice President Harris, the peaceful transition of power despite the threats of violence, and let's be honest, the performances by J-Lo and Gaga, I mean, it all feels like a good foundation for us to build on tonight, absolutely. I saw earlier today a list of best quotes from today's event. Also saw a list of best quotes from other inaugurations throughout history. And one quote made me actually stop and think a little bit. And the quote went like this. It said, "Much has been given to us, and much will rightfully be expected from us. We have duties to others and duties to ourselves, and we can shirk neither." Now, except for the word shirk, that sounds like a quote from a superhero movie. And actually, it sounds very close to what Peter Parker heard from Uncle Ben in the Spider-Man movies, right? It did. Actually, it's from Teddy Roosevelt's second inaugural address in 1905. And clearly, Teddy got it. With great power comes great responsibility. And it's a message that we need to take to heart even today. The racial divide in our country that has been at the forefront of our national discourse over the past few months, we all know it's been an issue that many in our Black, Indigenous, people of color, and our immigrant and refugee communities, they've been calling it out for centuries. And finally, we're seeing motions forward, we're seeing movement more forward on a national level. And this momentum towards action, it can't be a moment or a movement that kind of comes and goes. It's important that we intentionally and consistently work toward healing the wound created by racial, ethnic, and religious bias. And we need to work to build an equitable and just society so that all people can thrive. The conversations we're having here in Bloomington, the issues that we're dealing with, they are not unique to Bloomington. Cities across the country are having the same conversations. And while these conversations are supremely important, nothing gets done until we can talk about this. The conversations are important, but it's the actions that follow the conversations that matter even more. A few years back, the Bloomington City Council and staff, we did a 2-day retreat to develop a 5-year strategic plan for the city. And that list of strategic priorities that we put together, it included things that you'd expect, like high quality services and focused renewal. But also on that list was the strategic priority of advancing equity and inclusion in Bloomington. Now, in the years since, I will admit, we have moved in fits and starts towards that goal. We've taken 2 steps forward, 1 step back, perhaps. But there was always a commitment on behalf of the city to do more than talk. And over the last several years, I do believe that we've made progress on this strategic priority. For example, just this year, the City Council unanimously adopted a racial equity business plan. The plan charts a path for the city to intensify its work to create and support an inclusive culture that values and advances racial equity throughout the city of Bloomington. Additionally, we hosted a series of racial equity training sessions for both staff and council members. We updated our job descriptions. We needed to identify and remove unnecessary barriers to entry and to incorporate racial equity as a core competency required of all positions in the city. We initiated staff-driven teams that will advance racial equity work from the perspectives of individual departments or divisions. And I'm proud to say that more than 60 employees, and that's about 10% of our overall organization, they answered the call to act as change agents for their respective departments. And later this year, we're going to kick off an intensive problem-solving initiative that brings together residents, community organizations, nonprofits, businesses, and city employees to create a shared vision for how we want to work together to address inequities related to health issues and to ultimately work to eliminate racial disparities in our community. Now, 2 things. First of all, that's not an exhaustive list of the things we've done. And 2, without question, we have so much more work to do. I have said in the past, I'll continue to say, there is no one single thing that can be done to resolve centuries of racial inequality. But we are committed to learning from past mistakes and committed to being intentional about moving our work forward. That's one of the reasons why I'm excited to hear from our speakers tonight. I'm excited to learn from others and to work in collaboration with the entire community to build a Bloomington that's a vibrant, safe, and healthy place where people of all races can thrive. Now, I know I'm for the most part, I'm preaching to the choir here when I say just how important this work is, especially right now and especially right here. There are people in the city of Bloomington who don't understand why we're doing this work. Not only do they not understand, they are appalled that we're wasting tax dollars on these efforts. And I promise you, they are watching right now, and they'll be sharing those opinions and many other opinions on social media later tonight or tomorrow. I shared a story recently that last October on a Saturday morning, a group of protesters showed up in front of my house, carrying signs, flags, and using a bullhorn, many of them carrying weapons. They had a long list of grievances that they wanted to air. I talked to them for almost 2 hours, but the one that stood out was their complaint from one person. He complained that we on the city council and members of the Bloomington School Board, that we wasted so much time talking about racial equity. He actually said to me, "Tim, there's no such thing as racism in Bloomington, Minnesota." Now, I'm not often at a loss for words, but I honestly didn't know how to respond to a statement like that. What it shows more than anything is that we have work to do, and it's not work just among those of us here tonight. We need to spread this work across the city of Bloomington in ways both big and small. We need to grow this effort. We need to continue to align with our partners who joined us this year in this celebration. Last year, this was only a Bloomington event, a City of Bloomington event. This year, we are so pleased to welcome and thank heartily our friends at Normandale College, Northwestern Health Sciences University, and the Bloomington Public Schools, as well as our folks here in the City of Bloomington who have worked so hard on this. We have duties to ourselves and duties to others, and we can shirk neither. Folks, the City of Bloomington remains committed to our values and our beliefs in equity, inclusion, civility, and tolerance. Let's all get to work. Thank you all for joining us tonight in this important conversation. Thank you to our city staff for pulling this together. Thank you to our partners for your participation. Look forward to the conversation. Faith?
Thank you so much for that, Mayor Bussey. I wish I had like a virtual mic drop that I could do. But I'll just give it a clap. I appreciate your reflections and your comments and that inspiring call to action for the community and the work that you're doing to lead the City of Bloomington in these efforts. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Joyce Esther, who is the president of Normandale Community College and also a financial sponsor for this event tonight. Dr. Esther, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, Faith. I was thinking the same thing about mic drop. Thank you very much, Mayor Bussey, for your comments and remarks. I and Normandale Community College is so very proud and excited to partner with the City of Bloomington and others on this endeavor. I will say for myself, this is an amazing day for me. I'm very excited about this day. I think that a lot of wonderful things happened. I, for one, feel like I can let out the breath I've been holding probably for many years. And so I'm really excited about an event like this where we can talk about racial healing. I went and looked up, as we talked about this work, we're going to share truth, deepen relationships, and build trust to create a more just and equitable world. And I think that the part about sharing truth is really going to be important for the work that we do, because so often we aren't really willing and able to tell the real truth and to really have honest dialogue with one another. And I think until we can get to that space, we're going to have a hard time getting to where we want to be. At Normandale Community College, I've tasked our institution, much like Mayor Bussey has talked about and other folks around the country, is we've got work to do. And we have 3 priorities that we set out, that I've set out for our institution for this year. And it is to help to primarily to eliminate racial disparities. And we've been reading a book called From Equity Talk to Equity Walk. And I think it goes back to what you're saying, Mayor Bussey, about not just talking about it, but what are we going to do about it? And one of the things that the book talks about is how do we move from an area where everyone achieves at the level as our highest achieving individuals. Right? So when we're talking about gaps, it's not about, dumbing down anything. It's about making sure that everyone has access and everyone has the ability to achieve at the highest levels. And so I'm really excited about it because, as we often say, if not us, who? Normandale, the largest community college in the state of Minnesota, we have a responsibility to the 14,000 students that we serve, who over 40% of them represent underrepresented populations. And so we have work to do. I was really excited about some of the words that President Biden said today. And I quote, he says, "We have much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain." And as I was listening to that, and I was thinking about the work that we have to do now, when we talk about repair, we have to acknowledge that something's broken. When we talk about restore, we have to acknowledge that there's a separation. When we talk about healing, we have to acknowledge that there's pain and hurt. And also when we talk about build, we have to acknowledge that there's a disruption. But he also ends on a positive note. We have much to gain. When we do this work together, we can gain wonderful things together as a community. And so I look forward to hearing from everyone. I am not going to stay before you long. As I said, I was so inspired today. As an African-American woman, I was inspired by Miss Amanda Gorman. I see the future in her. I look at this young woman and I'm like, we're going to be okay. Try not to get emotional. And I'm going to leave you with how she left her words. She goes, "There is always light if only we are brave enough to see it, and only if we are brave enough to be it. Let's be that light, Bloomington." Bless you.
Okay, so I really have to find a way to do a virtual mic drop at this point. And not only that, a way to like focus on what you're saying and take notes at the same time. Thank you so much, Dr. Esther, for those powerful statements and those reflections and comments that you shared with us. I'm excited. I think we're already off to a great start. And I think this is sort of a powerful indication of what's to come. So with that, I am going to share with you just a few protocols that we will observe for tonight's presentation. You should see those things show up on your screen now, and I'll read them off before we jump into those presentations. So one thing that you may have already noticed is that all attendees are muted upon entry. So you don't really have the ability to unmute yourself. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that there's space for all people to engage in a conversation without talking over each other. So please do use the chat to engage in the conversation and add your comments and reflections. And if you want to do like a reaction, like a hand clap, and that's your way of saying this a virtual mic drop, feel free to do that. At the end of each presentation session, there'll be a question and answer portion. So we will pull questions from the audience and address those to the presenters. And then finally, just a reminder that photos and video have been taken. And so if you don't want to have your photos used for other purposes or have that as a possibility, feel free to turn off your cameras. So with that, I am going to introduce our next panel. And well, I should say our first panel of presenters here tonight. And so our first panel of presenters include a really powerful and dynamic group. We have Elaine Luckett of Northwestern Health Sciences University. We have John Parker Derboghosian, and I practiced this so much with John yesterday, so I'm hoping I'm getting it right. Okay, I got a thumbs up, that's good. And we also have two amazing young people, Tom Lloyd and Amal Muhammad, who are going to share with us some of the things that they're doing in the community right now to advance racial equity. And so we are going to start the conversation today with Amal and Tom, and I'll just have you unmute yourselves and introduce yourself to the virtual community here, and then I'll follow up with a few questions.
Hi, my name's Tom. I am a sophomore from Jefferson, and I am really excited to be here. And I'd like to thank Ms. Jackson for making this amazing event. And it's going to be a tough act to follow the mayor, and Miss Esther.
Thank you, Tom. And Amal, do you want to introduce yourself as well? Okay, so I think we may be having a few technical issues hearing you, Amal. Do you want to try talking again, or otherwise I'll pose a question to Tom as we try to troubleshoot? Oh, okay, got your message. So while Amal joins on her phone, Tom, I'm going to pose the first question to you. Will you share with the audience here today just a little bit about the organization that you represent, BARC, and sort of how that got started?
Yeah, so I am a member of BARC, and I'm representing them tonight. Sorry, I'm really nervous. And we are a coalition of current and former Bloomington students that really saw an opportunity. We realized that there was no youth-led organization working on advancing racial equity. So we took that as an opportunity to start a group and try to make a change in our community and address the issues we experience as BIPOC individuals in our community. And BARC, we're always looking for new members, so if you want to join, that would be amazing. And BARC is it's short for the Bloomington Anti-Racist Coalition, and we work with a lot of different leaders in our community to advance racial equity. That's a little short synopsis of what we are.
Tom,
Okay.
thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, Amal, we can hear you now. So go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry. My Chromebook's really slow and Wi-Fi doesn't work too well on there. I'm Mohammed. I'm a sophomore at Jefferson currently, and I am so thrilled to be here at an event like this. I've never heard of something like it, and so I'm super excited to join and see what's going to be happening and what this event is going to look like.
Thank you both for that. And so I'll throw out a couple more questions, and Amal and Tom, feel free to sort of ping pong or bounce back and forth between who answers. But I'll start with, so what work have you been involved in? You talked a little bit about how you got started, but what have you been up to over the last several months?
During the events of, we've set up a lot of protests after George Floyd's death. We've organized protests also for Isaac Iden and the removal of SROs from our school. We've protested some of the BPS, Bloomington Public Schools, efforts, and we're planning more things, and we've also met with Bloomington Public School curriculum and teaching directors to make a more inclusive curriculum that includes students of all backgrounds. And of course, we're always working for more projects and more things to advance racial justice. And Tom, feel free to add on.
Yeah, so we've really been doing a lot in the recent months. In August, we were one of the 22 school districts that protested in Minneapolis. And then in October, I believe we had a protest to really demand change in our community. We feel like there's a lot of talk about racial equality, but not enough action. So that was what the protest was about. And we also started affinity groups for BIPOC students to have a comfortable space outside of the schools, because sometimes having a community in a school with a teacher can be really hard for BIPOC students. So we decided to do affinity groups by ourselves.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Tom and Amal, you talked about some of the work that you're doing, and what I heard in that is that you're doing some protests and some activism, but you're also working with the school district, and you're here tonight working with the city to have these conversations. So share with the audience a little bit about the importance of partnership in the work that you're doing.
So recently, I have been doing a little bit of studying about Malcolm X, and something that he really emphasizes is the coming together of community to unite and to fight, oppression and discrimination. And that's something that can only happen when you unite with others, when people come together with a unifying force, which is to get rid of, racial inequalities that we all, most of us experience today.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like, we cannot do this change without others. The city leaders can enact the most change, and that's why we really love working with them, because they can really make an impact on our community, and they're the ones that are the people who can really control equity and make it a more equitable community.
Thanks for sharing that. That's just really powerful. And so my last question for you is sort of reflecting on the National Day of Racial Healing, right? It's a time to sort of bring people together to talk about how do we create this roadmap to build an equitable society. What advice do you have to other young people who are looking to get engaged in racial equity work? And for that matter, just other people in general, right? The community at large who are looking to get involved in racial equity initiatives. If you had some parting advice for them, what would it be?
Well, speaking as a 16-year-old, it's not easy to always, be brave and open up about things that you've gone through. But I always find that when I do share my experiences, it's just an immediate kind of peacefulness that comes over you, just a lift off of your shoulders when you realize, you're not suffering alone, and you're not alone, and you have people to talk to about this. And that's why this Racial Healing Day is something that everyone can benefit from, especially young people, since we always find it hard to get out and talk about it.
Yeah,
Tom?
I'm like speechless. I think I'm all perfectly summed up my thoughts on it too.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you so much for sharing that. I am going to move on to John to share a little bit about some of the work that he's doing at Normandale Community College, and then we'll circle back in a few minutes and take some questions from the audience for the three of you. So John, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll follow up with some questions to talk about the work that's happening at Normandale.
Thank you, Faith. So my first name is John. My last name is Parker Derbahosian. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I am the Equity and Inclusion Officer for Normandale Community College.
So John, Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, long title. What does that mean and what do you do?
So first I want to be mindful that I don't use chief in my title, and that's very deliberate as part of the work that we're doing with Indigenous communities at Normandale and listening to Indigenous communities. That is a title of reverence and honor in that community, and so throughout Minnesota State we have been moving away from, at their request, moving away from using the word chief in our titles. So as the Equity and Inclusion Officer for Normandale, that's a very large role. That has started, so the role is new in the sense that it's a position on its own, and I've been in the role a couple years now, and it really starts with building trust on the community, of having conversations across the community to understand the narratives, the multiple narratives that are happening on campus, and then really diving into the data. And not just diving into data in a way that, we have lots of data, so great. It's really diving into the data to see what is the story that this data is telling us and how can we act, right, on that particular data. And so I do a lot of, I don't know if consulting is the right word, but partnering with a variety of stakeholders and departments on campus to identify goals that they may have as it relates to equity and racial equity. Or equity in a variety of different dimensions. And then from there, also convening our Equity Council to develop longer term strategies related to our Equity and Inclusion Plan or Affirmative Action Plan or a variety of other initiatives, right, that we have going on campus. In a summary.
No, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that information in the beginning too about the title and sort of where the state system is going with that. That's really important to know. John, I know that you shared a few images that we wanted to pull up and present to the audience today. I'll make those available on the screen so that you can talk about them. But while I do that, why don't you share with us the sort of most impactful part of your job, or what do you feel like is sort of the one thing that you do that really allows you to make impact, if you can narrow it down to one thing?
I was talking earlier with some folks today actually about this type of position and motivation for the work. And like, look, this is my field, right? I can talk all day long. I can present all day long. I've got lots of great data. I've got lots of great peer-reviewed research. But at the end of the day, I'm just one person. And so unless I have partners in the work and people who want to engage in the work, and I actually want to lean into a story from a former colleague of mine at a position I held previously. My first day on the job, I had a conversation with him, and there were some things happening at the organization, and he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, "John, I don't need any more allies. I need people who are willing to have a stake in this work and are willing to lose something." And he's like, "I need accomplices." And that just really struck me, and I was like, done, ready, like, let's talk, right? But ever since then, I said, I'll cite you appropriately. And he's like, well, don't use my name. But I like to share that story because it really, I think, is beginning to characterize the difference between where we were in terms of equity and inclusion in the early aughts and where we're headed in the field. I'm talking about the field, not in the long fight against white supremacy. But I think where we're moving in the field is towards developing accomplices and moving away from allies.
Okay, so I'll pull up those slides, John, so that you can share a little bit more about what you're doing at Normandale Community College.
So I wanted to share. So to return to Dr. Esther's earlier comments in today's session, she has given a mandate to the campus, to a threefold mandate. One, eliminate all equity gaps in student success outcomes by 2025. Minnesota State is trying to do that by 2030, and Dr. Esther has said Normandale will do it by 2025. And then from that, by 2030, she has set a mandate that our students who are degree seeking, so they enter Normandale Community College and they say, I want to earn an associate's degree, that they have a completion rate of 50% or better. And then the third part of that is supporting and sustaining a pervasive institutional culture that is culturally competent and service oriented. But when we're talking about equity and racial equity, what does that mean? And so this is, I just wanted to show the image of this, right? There's no dates on here. There's no percentages. I just want you to see the lines. This is student success data, right? And over a period of a few years from Normandale Community College. And you can see some of the two of the lines are basically like together, right? And then you see the two bottom lines are also kind of together, but there's about a 10 to 13 point gap between those. When we're talking about equity, we're saying that we don't want an individual's race, ethnicity, gender identity, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, faith tradition to be able to predict how they're going to do at Normandale Community College. And so what we're looking for is, if you want to go to the next slide, Faith, is this. So you still see variation, right, from year to year. These lines are going up, they're going down, but there's equity in outcome, right? And for Normandale, I think just generally speaking, I think there's this idea that, well, every student then has to get a 4.0. Well, that's not actually what we're talking about. We're talking about equity in outcomes, right? And when we look at Normandale, by some measures, we're really talking about really zeroing in and better serving, for sure, 700 students, but also looking at if we design and remove the barriers, right, to our underrepresented student populations, which we define as either BIPOC students, and for those BIPOC, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So our BIPOC students, or our first generation students, or our students of lower socioeconomic backgrounds, right? If we remove the barriers and really focus on that population, it actually opens up the institution for everybody, right? And so I think that's what we're looking at in terms of reducing, eliminating rather, those equity gaps. I'm done with that visual. I need a fancy word for it. Right now I'm using mind the gap because that's what we're trying to do, but I'm sure folks at Normandale who are far better wordsmiths than I will brand it right appropriately. But I did, before we move on, Faith, I did want to name a few things as we're talking about naming truths. Minnesota, depending on a given year, the median household income, and this is for the state, the median household income for white families can be double that of BIPOC families. The unemployment rate for communities of color can be 3 times that of white communities. Home ownership for BIPOC families could be as low as 20%, while it could be around 80% for white communities. And the Federal Reserve Bank characterizes Minnesota's opportunity gaps for P-12 students as a crisis. And so I think it's really important that we name that, because as we're looking at racial healing, and it's been really great that we've been able to partner for the past 3 days with Minnesota Peacebuilding Leadership Institute. And if you weren't able to attend those racial healing circles or their training on Monday, I encourage you to connect with them, because they offer them throughout the year that you can attend either as an individual or have your organization partner with them. They talk about that we can't move towards resilience or reconciliation before going through an initial stage of acknowledgement, which is memorializing, naming the issues, reflecting on root causes, and acknowledging multiple truths. And I really am struck by, when I work with them, of truth and reconciliation, how important the and is, that conjunction in this work, that we can't get to reconciliation unless we have truth. And so it's really important as we're looking at what we're doing at Normandale, right? I'll give one example of that. We named an issue that BIPOC students, how we were placing them into college level courses was not working. We were seeing it at Normandale. We saw it reflected in the literature for many, many years. That we knew as a field, right, that this was an issue. And so we reflected on those root causes of, we inherited a placement system that's used generally throughout the country. But we looked at that, we looked at the data around that, we created a new process, and even immediately in the data from that pilot project, we began to see that this new process was closing the equity gap for our BIPOC students. And so this has led, this was a model of things that we've begun to look at, satisfactory academic progress. We've been looking at giving all faculty not only their course success data so they can dive into what's happening in their courses for their BIPOC students, but also equipping them with a new grant that we received to give every faculty member culturally responsive pedagogy practices to meet BIPOC students in their classroom. We are going to provide for every employee on campus an intercultural competency assessment with corresponding programming so that they can have the skill sets, because these skill sets, frankly, in the 21st century, they're not optional. They're something that we all need, right? And so Normandale is recognizing that and is providing that to all of its employees. We created a Somali area studies program that, as we understand it, is the first of its kind, potentially in the nation. And it features language and cultural courses. And that was responding to our Somali students, right, on campus. But it's also, we're seeing folks, those language courses those seats were gone in a day, right? Because we see a lot of folks at Normandale who want to learn the Somali language that are either they identify as Somali or they recognize that they want to work with a Somali community. We have a cohort of racial healing circle facilitators who are going to be offering racial healing circles on a regular basis on our campus to create that space where we can talk about white supremacy and grapple with healing, right, that historical trauma. And then President Esther and the college have established a Black Men in Teaching program that will specifically recruit Black and African American and African men into this program that will include not only wraparound services, but considerable financial support to ensure that they meet their degree goals and then can become a P-12 educator. And I can go on like a lot, right? And I'm gonna stop. But one thing that I want to leave that I've been saying a lot at Normandale and then I want to leave with this community this evening is last March, because of COVID, and since then, we've had to see how quickly we can turn around and make changes to our operations. I mean, at Normandale, we had to turn on a dime, basically. And as we acknowledge this evening, racial healing and the historical trauma of white supremacy and the ongoing trauma of white supremacy, and we begin to take those risks to engage and to build trust and to negotiate solutions and engage all of the various systems, whether they're educational or political or economic, we know that healing won't happen in 5 or 10 or 25 years, but we don't need to wait 5 or 10 or 25 years to make the turn. And I think COVID has shown us that we can make some really serious change very quickly, and we could make it today.
So the mic drops again. Thank you, John, for that. That was extremely powerful. And I really appreciate you sharing that with the group. I think there are a few people, more than a few people, who agree with me. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left to take some questions from Tom, Amal, and John. I don't see any in the chat right now. So feel free to go over to the chat and add some questions if you have those. But I'm going to have a follow-up question for you, John. And this wasn't a part of the script, so please indulge me. If you don't mind, would you mind sharing with the group what that process feels like? So what I heard from you is that, COVID is sort of a model of how we can do things. We can change things, right, when we're sort of forced to do that. But what does that feel like? And so what are some of the key factors in creating success in Normandale? You talked a lot about the great work that's happening there. Really proud of what's happened there. But what does it take to accomplish that great work. And so what advice do you have for those who are looking to do similar or same things in their organizations?
That's a great question, and I hesitate because I know that it will look different for different organizations, right? Just in the work that I've done in my career, right, working for either a health clinic or consulting with a health clinic versus, you know, a different, even working at different community colleges, right, within the metro area, it's very different work. And so I think where I'm going with that is to recognize that there's an ambiguity about it as you're sitting in community with folks and telling and hearing the stories and hearing the multiple truths and gathering the data that you need that you can actually act on, you know, just not just having a survey for survey's sake. You're gonna face ambiguity. That's gonna be a thing, and you need. I guess I'm gonna say I'm very blessed to be at Normandale. Because I share this story a lot, and in my interview with Dr. Esther, she said, I don't want this position to be doing the same things 2 years from now. Like, because of the work that you're doing, I want this to be we're gonna have to completely redo and look at your position description. And obviously I applied for the position. I wanted to work at Normandale. Normandale has a great reputation. But after that statement, I was like, please let me get this job. And it's a testament to Normandale that 2 years in, we are literally, 2 years and 3 months in, we're literally redoing and relooking at my position description, because Normandale, the leadership was like, we want this position not because we can say we have one, check the box. It was and it's literally on a daily basis. I have conversations with folks that are deep, intense conversations around, let's navigate the ambiguity and what is that going to look like? And it's different, right? Procurement with finance and operations, like how we are purchasing, right, is a different conversation than, you know, having a conversation with a faculty member. And then even then it's different from like chemistry to art to theater, right? Those conversations are different. But it is a credit to Normandale that they said, we're not just going to create this position. We are serious, right, about this position. And I think we also saw that last summer in the wake of Mr. George Floyd's murder, is that how the campus stood up to that, right? We could have done, you know, some listening sessions, right? And then that would be like the end of it. And it was very different. We had meetings where we're like, no, we're not going to do business as usual. We're going to sit with this. We're going to talk about this, right? We didn't say, you know, we brought in peace building and we had racial healing circles like they've done right here for the past 2 days for us. But then we said, no, we want to have folks who can offer these on an ongoing basis right here. And so there was always that wanting to lean in. And sometimes for me, just by myself as one person, and we're creating a department right now because I was like, there's so many conversations of folks wanting to lean in to go to the next step. And I'm like, I'm at capacity. I need help. And then it's a credit right to them that they're like, okay, well, how do we get you help? How do we expand the capacity right of this department? But I want to acknowledge, and I don't know who I'm going to quote here. So I apologize. A few years ago where we had a speaker at Normandale and they said, soft skills are the hardest skills. And I believe, like, if you want to take that a next, step further, like intercultural competency skills are like very hard skills as well, right? And so leaning into that and owning that and recognizing that this isn't just something, that I can go in and, write some code and now I've got a website, right? Like that's technical, that's hard skills. There's value right in that. And I don't want to take away and stigmatize or denigrate at all from hard skills, but being able to lean in and have these conversations and be comfortable in ambiguity, which is literally not what our brains want to do, right? If you dive into the neuroscience, like our brains are literally trying to predict what's happening so that we can control our environments. So to be able to wrestle and live with that and be comfortable in that ambiguity is important. It's an important next step.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. We have one question here in the chat, and John, is addressed to you. It says, what is one strategy you would suggest to address the urge to hang on to the way we do things around here? And that's in sort of air quotes. In the face of change, when folks are asked to embrace the ideas of racial inclusion and equity.
So this gets back to first I'll say this is my take, and so this is my answer to that, and so this is one person's response. But getting back to this idea of healing historical and ongoing cultural trauma and naming truths and acknowledging root causes. If you look just at, and I'll speak to higher education, yes, Normandale was founded in 1968. Oh goodness, I really hope I got the year right. The model of higher education we inherited over hundreds of years, right? Like the model of higher education, we did not create that at Normandale. We inherited that. We inherited the way we do things, right? And higher education was, to be honest, and we're going to be frank and name the truth, was created by white supremacists. Around folks that were like, higher education was for white families, higher, like privileged, not first class, but like rich, wealthy white families and the men of those families, right? And particularly like second, third, fourth born sons who weren't going to inherit the dukedom, right? If you will. And so a lot of these policies, a lot of the things that this is the way we do things are rooted in that white supremacy. And so I think that that becomes a really great interrogation point of, well, that's the way we do things around here because where did that come from? And then it begins to really, you can really now is everything rooted like in white supremacy? That's a different conversation. But if really interrogating, what does that mean? Where did that come from? Where did it come from in the first place? And is it actually effective? We could say at Normandale that, well, placement is how we've always done it. There's this thing called the AccuPlacer. Every institution in the country uses it or some form of it. You take the test, you get placed into courses. Doesn't matter, there's all this research that's saying that it's not working. This is the way we do it, right? Okay, yep, but we say that we're about equity, right? And so just adding one thing, which in our case was looking at high school GPA. Just looking at that one thing, which is saying that not everyone tests great. Not everyone tests great. I did not test great in math. I'll speak to personal narrative. I was terrible, like bottom of the barrel scores, right, in math. But I could get into a math class and do the work, right? And I think that's what we found at Normandale is that test scores do not talk to the initiative of our students. An initiative, right, that they're going to be there, they're going to do the homework, they're going to talk with their students, they're going to do the group projects, they're going to engage with their faculty, their instructors. An AccuPlacer score doesn't get at that, right? So just adding that one thing of high school GPA has really changed how we're placing our students and how we're addressing, right, that equity gap. So I think the way we do things around here shouldn't be stigmatized, but it should be named as, well, how did we get to this being the way that we're doing things around here? And it creates a really fascinating, lucrative, if you will, conversation to begin to understand the why of that, and then do we need to keep that?
Thank you, John, for sharing that. Before we move on to our second set of presenters, I want to circle back to Tom and Amal and to see if you have any reflections over things that you've heard or any sort of final words to the audience before we move on.
I just wanted to quickly say something to John Parker. So you brought up many times how low-income families or people from low-income backgrounds don't get the same opportunities. And I just wanted to point out that how much I agree with that coming from a family that is not high income, and that's not something that I should be ashamed of, that I don't, and many people from low income backgrounds don't get same opportunities, and that it's just really heartwarming to see people that do care and that people are trying to create equal opportunities, not only equal racial opportunities, but also equal opportunities from people from all socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yeah, and I really relate with the struggling in math part.
Thank you so much, Tom and Amal and John, for sharing with us. At this point, we're going to move on to our second set of presenters. And so we have 4 people that we're going to hear from. We have Jonathan McCullen, who is a representative on the Hennepin County Racial Equity Action Committee. We also have with us Sue McKinley, who is the leader of Volunteers Connection. She's going to talk about some work that she's doing with that group, a local group in Bloomington. We have with us Denise Richardson, who is the founder of the Beacon Axum Group, which is a consulting firm that sort of helps organizations on their racial equity path. She's also a Bloomington resident for I think 20 years or so, maybe a little bit more. And has done a lot of work with the city and engaging community members. And then we also have with us Dr. Jenna Mitchell, who is the assistant superintendent at the Bloomington School District, who's going to share with us about some of the work that's happening there. So to start, and I'll just ask Jenna, Sue, Denisha, and Jonathan, if you want to just give like a virtual wave or even a physical wave, just so folks who may have it on gallery view know who you are. Okay. I'm going to start with Jonathan. So Jonathan, if you want to just sort of start off by introducing yourself to the group. I mentioned that you're with the Hennepin County Racial Equity Committee, but I know that you wear many hats and you do many things. So why don't you share with the group a little bit about some of the work that you're involved in and introduce yourself.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Faith, for putting on this event. I would like to thank the city for doing things around the area of racial equity. My name is Jonathan McClellan. I have been a Bloomington resident for over a decade. I'm a retired Minneapolis firefighter. I was injured in the line of duty saving a young man's life. I learned several valuable lessons in the fire department. The most important lesson I learned was asking for help when I needed it, and teamwork makes the dream work. The fire department taught me the importance of good communication, problem solving, trust, and friendship. I graduated from South Central Tech in business. I went on to graduate with my bachelor's degree from Metropolitan State University, magna cum laude, with a focus on community leadership, management, and pre-law. I'm currently pursuing my Juris Doctor from University of St. Thomas School of Law. I am a member of the Race and Equity Advisory Council for Hennepin County. The mission of the Race and Equity Advisory Council is to strengthen the county's goal of disparity reduction and to advise the county board and county administration on the vision and strategy focused on reducing racial disparities and advancing racial equity throughout Hennepin County. The council meets regularly, and Hennepin County has dedicated leadership and resources to drive the importance of reducing racial disparities. This work will be most successful in partnership with residents who are experiencing disparities and partners who are assisting individuals and families who are helping those impacted by disparities. In 2020, Hennepin County declared racism as a public health crisis. This reality is that persistent disparities separate people who are not thriving in Hennepin County from those who are. Individual programs and initiatives within the workforce and economic development, housing, health, child and adult welfare, reform, environmental protection, justice, and infrastructure improvement have long sought to intervene at the root of people's needs. These are the areas that we are currently focused on in the council. I am also a legislative and congressional advisor in the areas of race and equity, criminal justice reform, police reform, and restorative justice. As part of this role, I work with legislative leaders in the House and Senate and the governor and his staff to write legislation and advance this agenda. I also sit on a congressional think tank with a bunch of talented people to provide direction on policy. I'm also a member of a few local organizations within the community that look to advance change and fight for justice. I've also been working to affect real change and trying to steer the movement and conversation into policy that will have lasting impact on our cities, our community, and the lives of people in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Jonathan, pardon me, for sharing that. I'm going to follow up with the question. And when we were preparing for this event today, I reached out to the speakers just to let them know, like, here's what we're going to talk about and have a little bit of a conversation. It was supposed to be like a 15-minute check-in. And I will say Jonathan and I's check-in went from 15 minutes to, I don't know, was it over an hour? And one of the things that you said then that really resonated with me is that you talked about all the work that you're involved in, but you said it's important to you that in everything that you do, you find a way to make sure it impacts Bloomington as a Bloomington resident, because Bloomington is special to you. So as a follow-up question, Jonathan, can you share with us a little bit about why sort of advancing racial equity is an important issue for the Bloomington community at large, and sort of why that's important to you?
I have 4 children, and my children go to Bloomington Public Schools, and it's important that they're going to be the individuals who inherit our city, our problems, our successes. And it's important that we do our part as individuals and community members in the community to make sure that their future is the best that it can be, and that we're setting them up for success.
Jonathan, can you follow up with maybe going into a little bit of detail about some of the work, either the work that you're doing at Hennepin County or the work that you're doing with the state? What are some of the projects that you're currently involved in?
Right now, we have 11 legislative initiatives. A couple of those legislative initiatives here in the state of Minnesota are qualified immunity. We're looking at trying to address that both in the state of Minnesota as well as nationally. Tracking use of force by police, blocking military equipment from the federal government, blocking training to police departments from foreign governments. We're looking at a statute of limitations, eliminating statute of limitations on wrongful death. And we're looking at the release of body camera footage in critically involved incidents involving police to the family or the legal representatives for those. We're also looking at putting together funds for families to tap into who have lost loved ones. To police, currently there is nothing that the families get when they lose a loved one by police. And that's a lot of these issues that have come to light have been some of the spark that we've seen in the movement during the protests. So these are some of the initiatives that there's a lot more, but those are the ones that I feel comfortable about talking about now.
And then what about your work with Hennepin County? Do you want to talk about some of the things that you're doing there, and just sort of, I know that's a new council that the Hennepin County started, and sort of what is that experience like or how have you been able to impact change?
The experience is really, it's different than other committees and commissions that I've been on, because a lot of the agenda, a lot of the planning comes through our committee. So all those areas that I talked about in Hennepin County come through our committee, and we actually have breakout committees where if we see change in it that needs to happen, we amend it and we get it going, so it's a working product for Hennepin County. So when we're talking about the workforce or economic development, housing, health, child and adult welfare reform, environmental protection, justice, and infrastructure. I know at our meeting, we have a meeting tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about health within jails and the type of care that's provided to inmates in light of the Department of Justice investigation into men medical. So we're going to be talking about those types of initiatives. We recently put together a plan for environmental health where we talked about infrastructure within the county and updating infrastructure. We're talking about pipes in the ground, plumbing, in communities that typically can't afford those types of tax burdens or fixes, and providing a sustainable future for those communities.
One final question, Jonathan, before we start to take questions from the audience. It seems like you have a lot going on, right? Important work, but there's a lot of it. What motivates you to keep going and keep at it?
I've been doing this work or similar work for the better part of 15 years, and it's my life, and I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing the outcomes, the positive outcomes, and when you hear the stories of people in the community about what they've gone through, or you've even experienced them yourself, it just lights an additional fire that says that something's not right and it needs to be fixed. And if you're going to fix it, you can't be a player in the stands. You have to be a player on the field. So I choose to play the game.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about the work that you're doing and what motivates you with the audience here today. At this point, and as you listen to the different presenters, feel free to add questions to the chat throughout, and we'll turn to those at the end. I'm going to turn our attention to Sue. Sue, if you want to give like a virtual wave or a physical one. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and talk a little bit about your organization and how it came to be?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on this panel tonight. My name is Sue McKinley, and I'm mom to 3 kids in the Bloomington School District, and my husband and I have lived in the city for 17 years now. And my day job, I'm a consultant in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But tonight I'm here to speak with you as a representative for the organization called Bloomington Volunteers Connection. And we're a group of grassroots volunteers. We like action. We like to do stuff. And we don't actually care if it's our stuff or somebody else's stuff. If it's a good idea, we want to help. So we congregate through Facebook, and we also have Zoom meetings, and we participate on other initiatives. We organize our own. We coordinate and try to be a gathering place to help with education about other initiatives, even if it isn't something that we're participating in directly. And I'm sorry, did you want me to tell you about some of the initiatives as well?
Feel free. Go ahead, Sue.
Okay. Well, our organization started about a year ago, and it was based around an idea called Kids Mentoring Kids, which was a way to help expand the face of leadership to better reflect all communities, all identities, all everything. And based around that idea, we've expanded and I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of some of the things we've done, because we've done a fair amount. But one thing we did was conduct a campaign for social justice books to increase awareness for people. So 2 of our members actually worked with the Human Rights Commission for the city of Bloomington and got a nice chunk of money and bought a bunch of books on Amazon and then put a little sticker in them so people knew they came from the city of Bloomington, and distributed them around the city of Bloomington. And they're great books. So they did some research so that they could reflect all different, I mean, I think there were 15 different books on 15 different topics, and they were for little kids up through adults. So that was one of our initiatives. We've also conducted a number of letter writing campaigns for the city of Bloomington. We've reached out to the Bloomington School Board as well as the city of Bloomington to show support for racial equity initiatives, and really more broadly all equity initiatives, because we know you guys hear sometimes some of the negative, and we want to make sure you're hearing the positive too. Your community wants this, and we want to make sure that that is being heard as well in a positive way. And I should mention, we're a really positive group. We're here to just do great things for our community and to show support, and we can do it in a really positive way. We helped volunteer on the Youth Talks town hall that was led by Faith last summer. It was a beautiful event, but that was another thing we'd lend some energy to. We've conducted some book club discussions. There's some internal awareness for ourselves initiatives, and yeah, those are we've done things like a cloth mask donation drive and helped with Veep rental assistance drives and so on. So like I said, we'll do anything. If we think it's helpful and positive, and if it's something we can lend some energy to, then we're in.
Thank you, Sue, for saying those examples. Follow-up question to you, similar to the question that I asked Jonathan. You have kids in the school district, you're a consultant, you're leading an organization, so you have a lot going on. What's your motivation for getting involved in this work, and then also for organizing your fellow community members around the issue of racial equity?
It's heart work, and when you see it, and when it crosses your heart, you have to jump in. And I can share on a personal level, I have 3 boys, and my second son was born with low vision. And that was the day I became an advocate, because that was the day I started seeing prejudice. I started seeing people think they know something about him based on a detail about him. And I'm naive to the experience of racial prejudice, but I'm not naive to prejudice. And when you see it, when you start to see it for one, you see it for all. And that's when you become an advocate for and injustice everywhere. And it's, to quote Martin Luther King, because it's a good week for that too, injustice anywhere is injustice is, oh, I'm going to say it wrong, is injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So it's personal heart work.
So much for sharing that, Shu. And then, so you talked about it being a volunteer organization that's made up of members of residents in the Bloomington community. I would be remiss if I didn't allow you an opportunity to talk about how folks can get involved with your organization.
Sure. Well, I'll put my email in the chat, and then anybody that has any interest can reach out, and I can tell you more. Otherwise, you can look for us on Facebook. Our title page is Bloomington Volunteers Connection.
Thank you so much for that, Sue.
And we welcome everybody. So thank you, Faith.
No, as I mentioned before, if you have questions about the organization or anything that Sue shared with us and or Jonathan, feel free to add those questions to the chat. At this time, we're going to turn our attention to Dr. Jenna Michler, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Bloomington Public School District. Dr. Jenna, same thing for you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll talk a little bit about the great work that's happening with the school district.
Great, thanks, Faith, and thanks to the City of Bloomington for hosting this event. I'll say it's been really great to hear about what's happening in other organizations, and I just think this is a really great opportunity for us to come together and collaborate on, such an important thing. So yes, my name is Dr. Jenna Michler, and I'm in Bloomington Public Schools. I am the Assistant Superintendent in Bloomington Public Schools, and I've worked in a couple of other districts over the course of my career. I did my PhD work at the University of Minnesota in culture and teaching. And really that, for me, came about because of some work that I did overseas. I had an opportunity to be a part of an organization, a national organization that sponsors folks to work abroad for several years, and I did that. And I am someone who I am a white woman. I've been raised in a middle class family. My dad worked in a paper mill. I wasn't privy to what privilege and power can do and the impacts of power and privilege on my life until I had that experience and started to think more deeply about that. And that's really when I got interested in what are schools specifically, what is education doing when it comes to working within our current societal structures, and what is the intersection of power and privilege. So that's why I decided I wanted to continue my own education, my own learning, formally, and then also all the time, not necessarily through graduate programming, but I feel so fortunate to be a part of a team of folks in Bloomington that I am learning from all the time. And so Dina Wade-Ardley is here with us tonight. I know she's our Director of Educational Equity in Bloomington, and we have some just really fantastic folks in Bloomington Public Schools, equity teams who are coming together, doing some really great work. And so I don't want to get ahead of myself here, Faith. I know you asked me to introduce myself, but I'd be glad to talk more about that too in a little bit.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead, Dr. Michler. Why don't you share a little bit about the work that those teams are doing in the district, and then also the work that you're doing around the Safe and Supportive School Initiative?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that. So one of the, well, first I'll say that Bloomington Public Schools has been doing work around equity and access for a long time. We've known for a long time that this is something that we need to be working on. And I think Dr. Esther said it very well before, is this day is about acknowledging, right, that the work isn't done. And I think it's about talking about action and what we can continue doing and doing together. And so, within my role, I'll say I see one of the pieces of my role is really opening up space so that folks can come together and co-collaborate and create things that are going to help us really transform our school district in ways we need to create the most safe and supportive school system that we can possible for our students. And so with the help of Dina and the Office of Educational Equity, we've brought a framework and a set of tools to the district this year. We started the work with the school board last spring. And so everybody is receiving some training so that we have some foundational vocabulary around equity and access work. And I think what this offers to us is an opportunity for us to, when we engage in conversations, which we know can be challenging, that we can start from a place where we all have a common set of vocabulary that we're using. So that training started with our school board. It's being rolled out with equity teams in our district, and it'll be continuing for the next several years. We've partnered with some really great researchers. We have a woman named Dr. Arriaga who's working with our district on this as well. And so, that training is being rolled out. And at the same time, we are trying to figure out ways that we can continue to surface things we need to perhaps change and problems we need to solve. One thing we've noticed over the last several years is that we really need to think about our discipline practices in the district. And so another great thing that we're rolling out this year, and again, with the help of the Office of Educational Equity, is our restorative practices work. So bringing restorative circles into our buildings and training teams so that they're able to lead circles with our students and families so that we can do that work differently as we move forward.
Thank you for sharing it, Dr. Mishler. And then one final question. So you talked about being engaged in this work and have some of the personal connection to it and passion for it. What are some of the things that you've already started to see in terms of the ways that this work is having impact in the school district? Are you seeing signs of progress? And what do you look forward to?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, Dina and I talk a lot about one of the important pieces of this puzzle, I think, is accountability. And so we talk about, what does accountability mean? Who is held accountable, and by whom? And so those are conversations we keep having. I think some of the evidence that I would look for personally to see how we're doing in terms of our work is, I mentioned vocabulary. Do we hear people using vocabulary and common vocabulary, and then surfacing that vocabulary at the right time? We have meetings and conversations and all the time where I think we could do better to be thoughtful about really bringing in vocabulary around equity and access and what we're doing and not doing, and trying to talk through that together. So I would listen for vocabulary. I also, as I work with the principals quite closely, and so as I connect with them individually throughout, the weeks, the months, we talk about, how are you bringing the equity and access work to your building? And then how are you empowering your staff to lead the work too? Because, we're all stewards of the work. It's not just one person who can come in and lead this work alone. It's all of us working together, and we each have our own role and responsibility. So I look for that. I look for, as I hear, from the students who are here tonight, I know that you've collaborated, and as you said, with our learning and teaching department, right? So look for voices to come to the table and help us know what we can do and do better, and then to see the change that comes from that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And then finally, I am going to turn it over to Denise Richardson, who I mentioned is the founder of the Beacon Axon Consulting Group that helps organizations sort of analyze their firms and their organizations through a racial equity lens. She's also someone who's been involved in some community organizing in the city of Bloomington. So without me trying to do your introduction justice, Denisha, I'll turn it over to you to share the audience a little bit about yourself and sort of why racial equity work and advancing racial equity in the Bloomington community is of particular importance to you.
All right, thank you. Oh my goodness, my phone would ring at this exact moment, sorry. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I couldn't find my pearls, so I hope these will do. And if you're playing the lotto, I hope your number gets called. My name is Denisha Richardson, and I am a longtime resident of Bloomington. I moved to Bloomington when I was 10. My parents lived in Georgetown townhomes for 25 years. I am a graduate of Valley View Elementary, Oak Grove Middle School, and Olsen Junior High, Kennedy, and Normandale Community College. So I am a Bloomington resident through and through. And I currently work in international relations, but I also founded the Beacon Axiom group with a friend. And I think I was bound to do this. Like when I was in elementary, middle school, junior high, high school, Miss Wade Ardley, she started a leadership group, and it was called Shades of Brown, which was then transformed into OEE Leadership, the Office of Education Equity Leadership. And so that kind of helped me gain my voice. Back then, Black people, Black students, it was a very small percentage of us. We didn't have support. I believe Miss Wade was one of maybe 2 or 3 Black teachers in all. I never had a Black teacher. And so, I'm getting a little emotional. I'm trying to stay strong. So she kind of helped us navigate through that. She wasn't able to, do all and carry on, but she gave us the skills, the tools, and empowered us to encourage us to speak up. And although their life isn't fair, find ways to help improve and not to forget about your community at large. So I've always kind of been involved with community service here and there and throughout. And then I traveled. I attended a historically Black college and university. I got my degree from there. I then interned with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And I went to overseas and did my master's degree in intercultural and diversity studies at the University of Cape Town. And I just always try to find a way to give back and help out the community, learn about community. And then I still had this lingering desire to still serve my community. I knew military wasn't for me, so I decided to join the Peace Corps. And while in the Peace Corps, I served in Fiji. Philando Castile was murdered, and I remember waking up that day and I was just like, how can this be? How can we keep doing this? And I was just so broken. So from that point, I decided I'm gonna, in the words of John Lewis, be that good trouble. So I started with Peace Corps, and I just started demanding racial equity justice there. And I was like, we had to do something as an organization with the volunteers, but also educating our host country nationals as well. Because I'm here serving abroad, helping people to learn about Americans, where my fellow volunteers don't know the struggles of I'm new to the BIPOC, I just say BIPOC. So I was like, let's start there. So then I came back, I got a job in an international relations field, but I was still not feeling fulfilled completely. And sadly, George Floyd happened, his murder. And then that totally just devastated me to my core. And my fellow volunteer from the Peace Corps, we were just we have to act now. What are we gonna do? And so we decided to form the Beacon Axiom group. And from there, we wanted to focus on not just diversity and equity, but we wanted to challenge the status quo. We wanted to disrupt that. And we also said we wanted to ensure that these behaviors no longer go on. And so we have big dreams. We just started in June. And I said, before we get to that major stage, let's look back at our community. And that's what drove me back to Bloomington. From all my experience from childhood, young adult, and into now. And I was like, we have work to do. And I was like, I'm going to be that beacon, hence Beacon Axiom Group. And so that's how I started.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Denisha. One of the things that you talked about being motivated this summer And one of the things that I really appreciated this summer is that when we were going through really challenging times as a state and as a community, like a local Twin Cities community, and even within the city of Bloomington, struggling to make sense of what happened and think about, how do we move forward with this? You approached me and Mayor Bussey and some other council members about having a community conversation with some of the African American members from the Bloomington community about issues around police, community policing, and issues of fairness and justice and things like that. Do you want to share with the audience today sort of like what motivated you to do that? I imagine it was probably an intimidating experience to say, well, I'm going to reach out to the mayor and say, I want to have a conversation about issues of community policing. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 days after something like that had taken place. What motivated you to do something like that? And then what were some of the things that you were hearing from the community during that time?
Yes. Well, like I said, my family, we've lived in Bloomington for over 2 decades, and we have a long list of experience and mistreatment. And my brother, he passed away, but he had mental health conditions. And being a Black man, I was just like, I fear for him daily. And so we didn't have thankfully we did have Shiraka and some programs, but it wasn't a lot. But then it's still there was that issues with the police and their interactions with Black men, Black youth, kind of seeing us as trouble before we're just youth, So I was like, these issues are still going on today. And then I believe after the George Floyd incident, there was another Black man that posted something on Facebook where he got pulled over. And I was just like, okay, we have to do something. And again, I said, I'm not going to wait. So I reached out to my co-founder and he's like, okay, whatever you want to do, we can do some research. And so me and him, we're kind of come from the academia. So we started researching and we just started realizing there's some issues in our city that we needed to work on. So I reached out to you. I started reaching out to my different networks. I started going to businesses and again, we used to live in Georgetown. We don't live there anymore. I started reaching out to my old neighbors and just asking them, how do you feel? What do you think? Can you please come? And of course I got a yeah, the day of maybe 10, 12 people. But before that, I would call people please attend. We need to hear your voice. I can say these things, but I'm only one. If we all come together, we'll have a stronger impact. And so we just started from there. And Bloomington, although it is a city, it kind of acts as a suburb. So we don't have a lot of organizations that kind of represent the Black community. So it's kind of hard. You just kind of have to know people and kind of reach out and tap into the different sources that you have. So that's what I did. And hopefully we can keep it going.
Yeah, and so I mentioned that you had reached out to the city and we had a meeting and you were able to share some of your concerns. I know that you have been doing some community organizing work around housing issues and things like that. I'll pose to you the same question I posed to Dr. Mitchler. So what are some of the indicators of progress that you've witnessed, if there are any, over the last several months? And then what are you looking forward to?
So I am looking forward to those in our community that feel marginalized, having their voice heard, feeling included, feeling like they can trust the systems that are in place, and also feeling that they want to be and stay engaged. So throughout, from the summer until now, I see that there's a lot of interest and desire in home ownership in Bloomington. So right now, a lot of the mainly Black community, they want to own, but they don't know how. And so they're really interested in that. There's also the business. So they want to find different ways to provide for their family. They want to become their own business owners. So looking into those different issues, policing is very, very a major issue. And the fact that we had that meeting, a lot of people felt inspired. They felt okay, change is coming. There were some that were still questioning, is this just for show? But the fact that I think the work that you're doing and the ongoing efforts in the city's more vocal actions and promoting racial equity in the business plan, I think that has gotten a lot of good buyback. And so that's really great. And I just hope we can continue on from there.
Denisha, thank you so much for sharing that. I don't see any questions in the chat. So what I'm going to do at this point
is... I see one question.
Oh, do you? Okay.
It's from Amal. I loved my HBCU. It gave me a sense of community. It gave me that boost that like where I'm going is the right place. But I want to say I decided to do NCC first because like John shared, I had that. I was like lower economic, socioeconomic status. I was first generation, you know, Black. So I was like, okay, I didn't have all that support. So I decided to start there. And then that helped me get the confidence to like, you can go anywhere. So then that's from there, I decided to go to HBCU because of all the things that happened in my childhood. I was like, I want to have that stronger connection with like-minded people. And so that gave me a really good boost in life. But I want to say a huge thank you to Ms. Wade. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this line of work and I wouldn't have that voice. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And so at this point, it's about 6:30 and sort of the plan for after presentations is to break out into some small group breakout rooms. But before we ask for remarks from any of our elected officials, I just want to make space, so maybe about 5 minutes or so if we need it, for any of the presenters who presented tonight to add some final reflections or thoughts or even takeaways. So I'll just open it up to you all. If there's anyone who wants to share, please go ahead, and then we'll move into some final remarks from any of the elected officials on the call who would like to share.
Well, I'll jump in real quick, Faith. So I've been sort of texting on the side here with a couple of other people who are viewing, and we're all just so appreciating this space for people to come together and be able to share what's happening in Bloomington, because we know there's work that needs to be done, and this is a great opportunity for us to hear what different organizations, different people, government entities are doing, and how we might be able to work together as we move forward.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Mishler. Anyone else? Any of our others? And I'll open this up to you too, Dr. Esther and Mayor Bussey. I include you as speakers or presenters, but any other final remarks before we hear from our elected officials? Seeing none, at this time, I am going to turn it over. I know we have a few of our council members participating here tonight. And so if you would like to give remarks, just either raise your physical hand or your virtual hand, and then Matt, who's handling all of IT, will give you the ability to unmute yourself. Councilmember Coulter, have your hand raised.
Well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Faith for organizing this and putting this together. And excuse me, thank you, Dr. Esther and John. Some of you know my mom taught at Normandale Community College for 39 years. She still talks about how wonderful a place it is, and clearly that's still very much the case. I am just thrilled with the work that's going on there. And to Tom and Amal, I mean, it sounds really, really cliche to say the future is in good hands, but my God, is it ever. I am just inspired by the work that you folks are doing. So just keep it up, really. And the other presenters, Sue and Denisha and Dr. Mitchler and Jonathan, it's just really, really incredible to hear about the work that's going on in the community. And I guess I would just say, not that anybody's looking for my advice, but, speak up, act out, do the things that we know need to be done. There is a real desire for change, to make things better in the city of Bloomington. And there is a real desire to fight back against that. But, we know what side we're on. We know what side the community is on. And I'm just ready and eager to work with anyone to make things better. So just thank you.
So much, Councilmember Coulter. And then I believe I saw Councilmember Carter's hand up and Councilmember Lohman's hand up. You should have the ability to unmute yourself and give your reflections.
All right, I think I'm unmuted, so I'll just jump in really quick. So hi everyone, I'm Jenna Carter, and I will say I'm having some bandwidth issues. I was trying to kick my kids off whatever they're streaming, but my sound was going in and out before, so I'm sorry if that happens again while I'm talking. So I'm an at-large representative for the city of Bloomington, and I'm just really, really grateful and humbled to be here tonight, and really inspired just by all of the really incredible work that's happening among residents and then among the organizations in our community. And so I really loved that Dr. Esther brought up Amanda Gorman's poem today that she read at the inauguration, and particularly her last couple lines. They've just been kind of repeating in my head throughout the day, and then they were repeating in my head throughout this whole conversation. And so, I want to thank you, Faith, for your leadership and for facilitating this call. And I want to thank all of the people who called in or joined via video to participate and listen. And then I really, really want to express my deep appreciation for all of the speakers. You are the light in our community. You're going to help us do this work. We're in it together. And I think oftentimes, it's easy to operate in silos. It's easy to kind of feel like you're in it by yourself. But I think that this call, this event, these last few days, it really demonstrates how much incredible work that is happening across Bloomington and the power that we have when we come together and weave together all of these awesome, incredible, powerful things that are happening across our community. So I look forward to continuing these conversations. I see lots of familiar faces on the call. And so for those of you who I haven't met, I really hope we can meet in person soon. And just, I really look forward to continuing that racial equity work together for our city and our community. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Councilman Carter, for sharing that. And I saw Councilmember Lomas' hand up as well, and then I think we'll hear from Councilmember Martin after that.
Oh, hopefully you can hear me. Want to apologize for being late. Having meetings at 5 o'clock sometimes gets a little rough with me with my work. So again, I want to apologize for that. Many of the folks here, I know you in different capacities. And again, want to thank you, Faith, and also the rest of the staff, and really the council, really for our direction around this particular topic as we kind of continue to move forward. Certainly, my family has lived here, my whole life, and we've been working on these issues for a long time, and it's great to see such emphasis now on moving this particular these items forward. My mom's work with HRA, making sure that we had equity and folks being able to apply for housing for apartments at that particular point in time. Ongoing issues around making sure folks can seek ownership. I was part of the group that put together the Day of Diversity now, which is, I think, the day of unity now in the Bloomington high schools. And I also had the opportunity, as Denisha talked about, to meet Miss Wade. What a powerful woman she is, and her spirit in making sure that we continue to be committed to this topic, no matter what we do or where we're at in the community. So I look back to Miss Wade and so many of the other teachers and folks that I work with in the Bloomington Public Schools. We continue to try to make this city a place that everybody feels welcome to be a part of, no matter where you're from. That's what I really believe in, the great leadership of our mayor, Tim Bussey, and trying to make sure this is a place of choice for everyone. So I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for this work that we're doing here today, and we'll continue to do. And it will be here long after we're all dead and gone. As I think someone said, a speaker said, we got to do this for our kids and for our grandchildren that are coming.
So much, Councilmember Lohman. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, I just very briefly want to add my thanks to the organizers of this event, but especially to everybody who's attended tonight and been honest and talked about their perspectives. There's all kinds of reasons why Bloomington is really kind of a microcosm of the country. And one of the more disappointing ones is the fact that, as the mayor mentioned off the bat, we have folks in town that do not want us to have these conversations. because it's scary, or a zero-sum mentality of if somebody else wins, that must mean I'm losing something. But acknowledging where we have deficits in this city and where we have inequities in this city, this gave me tremendous hope tonight, because I think that's the greatest display of strength we can have, to be honest, and say where we need to work so we can build coalitions and start fixing those things. So yeah, I'll just add to my colleagues' call, please do, as we are continuing to work on this, call into public comment, keep participating in these meetings, because where those voices aren't coming forward, that fear, that division, it always fills the vacuum. So thank you all for your work, it's appreciated.
Thank you so much for that, Councilman Martin. In the spirit of thank yous, before I turn it over to the final person we'll hear from tonight, who's going to give us a call to action, and make sure you stick around for that because you don't want to miss it. I will offer up my thank yous as well to all of our sponsors. I'll be really brief. Normandale Community College, the Human Rights Commission, also Northwestern Health Sciences University. We didn't hear from Ilana Luckett today, but we'll be sure to get that information out to the group if we're able to sort of capture her presentations. And then also I want to thank those volunteers from the school district, both as a presenter and Director Dina Wade-Artley being a part of the planning committee for this work as well. And then, of course, the City of Bloomington staff who helped pull this together, namely Emily Larson and Melissa Worth-Prasad from our Community Outreach and Engagement Division. Also, again, thank you to the wonderful presenters for sharing your story, for being authentic and for being honest about, what are some of the challenges that we have, and then also for being brave enough, right, as Amal and Tom talked about, to sort of do things, right, and step out there and move this work forward. And so with that, I think I've covered all bases. We've heard from elected officials, and I've given out all my thank yous. So I am going to turn it over to someone that we've heard a lot about tonight, and that is, don't make that face, Director Dina Wade-Artley of the Bloomington Public Schools District. And she is going to end tonight's call with a call to action. And then from there, we're going to break out into small groups. And we'll ask you just to stick around for about 10 or 15 minutes or so for some networking and get to know some of the members of the community. And Director Wade will give us some further instruction at this time. So take it away.
Well, all I can say right now is, wow. This has been an experience. And those who missed it, we must tell them what they missed. We've heard some wonderful presentations, some wonderful work that's being done in the Bloomington community. And it warms my heart because I've been here in the Bloomington School District for 29 years. And for the first time, I feel the wheels really moving in the right direction. So it's always nice to get together and talk about all these wonderful things and listen to presentations and just kind of nod your head and go along with it. But tonight, before we leave here, we want to know what each of you are going to do to make Bloomington Public Schools a better place for this cause. So I want you to get ready. I want you to be honest. This is how I am all the time. That's why they keep me in the dark. Okay, no, that's a joke. Y'all supposed to laugh. Come on, Patrick, come on. All right. However, we do have to have a call to action. We will do this again in 2022, but we need to say from 2021 to 2022, what did we do? We didn't just come and listen to speakers. We didn't just come and got entertained or felt bad or felt good. What are we committing to do? And in our small groups, that's what we will be talking about. Each small group has a facilitator that will take notes and ask questions, and you can answer them. I hope you do, because this will help us move forward. There's nothing worse than having all of this energy and the wow of this event, and then we all drop the ball and walk away. Everybody on this call, I'm assuming, are committed to this cause. We're committed to a better Bloomington. We started off the day with the inauguration of our new president and our new first vice president of color, woman. We end tonight with a commitment at Bloomington, how we're going to make this world a better place for our BARC members, for the schools, students, for Dina. As she gets older, I might be in a nursing sister living in Bloomington. I want to be served purposely, you know, want to be taken care of well. And for the mayor, who will have a strong work ahead of him that he will get a lot of pushback on. But he needs to know that there are 39 of us on this call and that 39 people are standing behind him. He should never feel alone. Neither should Faith. Neither should any of you on this call. So Faith, you want to take us to our spaces, and we are going to have this networking so you get to know everybody around here so that next year you might be the presenter.
Thank you so much for that, Director Wade. I love the animations as well. So at this point, Matt, who's running technology, will break us out into those rooms. Just a quick reminder, if you're interested in leading this event next year, because we're looking for community members to take it over and plan it and give us ideas, send an email to equity@bloomingtonmn.gov, and we'll make sure that you'll be involved in that process for next year. So until next time, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all who've joined, and I hope you have a great evening. Matt, I'll leave it to you to take it away.